I'll read a bit about Anna. So Dr. Anna Tavis is an associate professor and academic director of human capital management at NYU School of Professional Studies. She's also a senior fellow with the Conference Board and the academic in residence with Executive Networks. She's a former executive editor of People and Strategy Journal, People and Strategy Journal, and is an associate editor of the Workforce Solutions Review. She regularly publishes in business media and has been quoted by the Washington Post, Bloomberg, the Human Resources Executives, Training Magazine, and prior to joining NYU faculty, she navigated a diverse career in academia, business, and consulting. So I'm really excited to have her speak to us today about why employee experience matters more than ever. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so I'm very excited to join you guys. Just to let you know, I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I mean, the school is in Lower Manhattan, NYU. You see, I'm being very patriotic here, and but we do have also a school of engineering, big school of engineering in Brooklyn as well. So excited to be here. I also want to extend to all of you an invitation to join some of our meetings now that we're all virtual. We have a big analytics community in New York, and we have about 2,000 people. David Krillman is my friend there and colleague. I think, David, you attended at Saroya as well. You attended some of our meetings as well, right? So I will send out to Julia our next upcoming meeting, which will be on the analytics of space. We're going to look at space exploration and what kind of technologies and data we need to be looking at, and what kinds of jobs are going to be available on Mars. You know, that's going to be our next topic. Now that we are all, you know, COVID shut it down here, and the walls are coming up, and we can't travel to Canada anymore. At least maybe we will go to Mars. So I will send that information. You know, we're a very, very welcoming community. And again, the silver lining of this epidemic is that, you know, all of the meetings are online now, and we can join each other regardless of where we are geographically. So what I want to do today as a format, I'm going to speak to you about, you know, some very general general terms about employee experience and why I think it is really going to be the future of HR. And from there, the opportunities that arise, you know, in terms of the needs to measure, the needs to scale, the needs to, you know, institutionalize. And I will share some research that is happening around it. And what I hope is that, I know that I only have 20 minutes, right, Julia? 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And when do you want the questions? Right after the presentation, or when all the presentations are done?
Typically do it after the presentation.
Okay.
So I guess 15 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for Q&A. If we don't have enough Q&A time, then we can just do some at the very end of the event.
All right, but just like, I think, was it Christopher or somebody said, join me on LinkedIn, same here. We can definitely continue the conversation. So really, really quickly, 3 topics that I want to touch upon. Why I believe employee experience is changing the way companies curate their cultures, like making this pivot from talent management to employee experience, and how it's becoming the kind of the brand that HR needs to live by. What's the effect of COVID and how COVID has become the accelerator of this particular trend. And then a few words, maybe we can collectively reflect on why we believe this will be the next normal. So how is it changing? First of all, a couple of things. Again, I was kind of focused on all sorts of data that's related to employee experience. So the environment in which, you know, COVID, you know, the pandemic landed was quite interesting. I don't know if you are familiar with Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman is one of the largest global advertisement firms, and for the last decade or so, they've been measuring that trust around the world. It's a global survey, not just North America, but including Europe, Middle East, some Asian countries. And the reason I brought that up is because I do think that trust is an important ingredient of the employee experience. And I'll define this later for you. So let's look at where we found ourselves right when this 2020 survey landed in January. So what they measure in that trust barometer are basically two dimensions: the ethics and the competence. You know, how do major organizations, major constituents, and institutions measure along those dimensions, and by where they find themselves on that, you know, 2 by 2, we can assess the level of trust associated with them. As you can see, no institution in the early 2020, really as a result of this data collection, was really both found as ethical and competent at the same time. And think about that environment. The other thing that this particular annual survey reflected was also the shift in the trust. It's been kind of negotiated in these companies. The statement on corporate purpose was changed for the first time in like 2 decades, since even, you know, the 80s, and at least in the US, by the Business Roundtable, which is a group of top corporate executives of the top 200 companies. And so they came up with this definition of the corporate purpose. Again, that was the breakthrough from the traditional kind of shareholder-oriented definition of the purpose of the corporations. Here, it was about customers, employees, exactly in these types of ratios that you see on this pie chart: customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and only then shareholders. So what I want to show you by, you know, starting out with this particular data is, on the one hand, you know, we were already in transition to a sort of in between cultures from, and again, I'm speaking from my experience in the US, from the very much shareholder-oriented culture to this more heavily weighted on the employee and customer and community side, away from shareholders. At the same time, the trust in organizations and institutions has been eroding for quite some time. So in this context, where does employee experience come in? And so those of you who are in HR probably know that the whole conversation around experience is, you know, again, goes back to customer experience, user experience, et cetera. But employee experience, there actually has a specific company that it is associated with and a specific date, 2013. And it was Airbnb when Mark Levy came in as the head of HR, and Airbnb wanted to really shift their focus on employees, because their statement of purpose was that if they generate the loyalty, the commitment, and you all know about engagement from the employees, that will transfer, you know, that sense of belonging and loyalty to their customer base. And so that was kind of a rationale behind which they, in 2013, swapped the name or the title of the function from HR into the employee experience function, and kind of leaning into that their customer-focused, you know, orientation as a business. The second set of data around employee experience I want to share with you is my own research that I've done with a group of my colleagues. Again, landed right before COVID. A lockdown in New York was in March of this year. Employee workplace experience, of which employee experience is an anchor. I do suggest, if you're interested in the topic, just Google this. You can download the PDF there's a lot of very practical information about what we were looking at and what we found. So the definition of employee experience is here. What is it? It is about this cumulative impact of experiences that employees have in organizations before, during, after their employment. And as you can see on this diagram, it is a close relative, even though it comes later in kind of on the historical arc, but a close relative of customer experience, user experience, and the overlapping space here is definitely human experience. So employee experience is the kind of a late arrival on the experience scene. So when we looked around and ran our survey, again, right before COVID, we found that about 1/3 of business organizations have been moving in the direction of embracing employee experience, sort of trending away from traditional talent management. It was really interesting comparing smaller organizations that were less mature, maybe from the HR perspective, but that worked to their advantage because they were leapfrogging the whole several generations of HR into embracing employee experience and adopting that, at least that language and some of the practices. Larger organizations, more traditional ones, they kind of developed employee experience functions or areas of HR on the side, usually and very often associated with the human capital analytics or people analytics functions. And most, as I've said, only about 1/3 of companies that we looked at have been playing around with this idea. The other thing in terms of governance of how this function has emerged, it was pretty much shared between the very top management of the company that were reorienting themselves, as I mentioned, into the different purpose, focusing on the employees, and HR, tooling up, upskilling and bringing in technology, analytics, et cetera, to help scale that particular approach. And one more thing I want to point out, because COVID will change some of that dynamic. As you can see, the majority of attention that companies were paying when they were talking about employee experience, mostly on the, while you are here, mostly focusing, some of it was on the recruitment side, talent acquisition, but the majority was about people in the organizations. That's how employee experience was defined. And then obviously, then we have the major disruption coming in. This is, you probably know, John Hopkins map that gets updated, really fascinating data visualizations here on COVID. So then COVID hit, where do we find ourselves? I think there are like 4 stages that I see in the COVID, in companies' response to COVID. The first one was the cheerleading phase. That made me very nervous when, we overnight went working remotely and everyone was cheering and saying, look, we did it. We, rallying around the flag, the morale went up, the people were really performing well, et cetera. And then obviously it went downhill from there. The next reaction we've heard was, oh, maybe we won't even, it's working so well, we don't even need the office space anymore. So all of that was really the early reaction. Now we made through that congratulatory phase. And now I think we are sobering up and we're really looking at what are the scenarios for this next normal, and how will this disruption help us shape the future of organizations as a whole. And on the other side of it, again, it's a little bit episodic. I'm just throwing some data at you. On the other side, as we continue to survey the sentiment of people working from home, what we've found that a majority in the long run, at the end of the day, wanted to go back home, back to the office. So this is Gensler, one of the major architectural firm. Again, annual surveys, and what they found that was about the end of summer, and this survey came out that only about 12% of the, that was a US survey, of 12% of the employees wanted to work exclusively from home. About 70% of people wanted to go back to the office for the majority of their week, which is interesting data, kind of contradicting that kind of cheerleading phase. So in this context of with all these moving parts, we have HR stepping up front and center, as different from the crisis that we've experienced before, which prior to that was, as you remember, financial crisis. It was all about the CFOs. The CFOs pulled us out of the black hole of that particular crisis. In this situation, it's about people. It's a primarily humanitarian crisis, and therefore, CHROs got the front seat here. So let's see what the changes are that we are going to see. And obviously, this is my projections, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. I think we're going to have this shift in purpose, organizational agility. On another topic, organizations that were already primarily agile in their operating models have fared much better than those who were not. And obviously that leads to resilience. Resilience is as the opposite of efficiency. So I think what we're going to experience and how it's going to impact HR is the shift toward all of employees to employee experience from the primary focus of HR on talent management. So here's the kind of the visual for you of how HR has been organized in these kind of on these tracks and these kind of siloed functions, and the need to reorganize ourselves for resilience, for continuity, to be able to service lots of humans, not just high potentials. So this is the kind of the key slide here. I think the main shift we are going to see is away from talent management that focused exclusively on the top of the house, identifying high potentials, over investing in that particular small group, about 10%, that led to a very imbalanced culture, to a much broader employee experience that will include people who are not only the employees, but the broader ecosystem of people associated with the company. And all of it is going to be enabled through analytics technology and new tools, and obviously require HR to retool itself as well. And so as an example, I'm kind of, Airbnb is the running theme here because I'm tracking this company from the employee experience perspective. It's really, really interesting, the letter that Brian Chesky, the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb, wrote to the employees whom he had to lay off, obviously, because it's a hospitality company. We know where hospitality ended up, but the extent to which the company went, and Brian specifically in a very personal way, went out to help the employees whom he had to lay off, was really remarkable. I mean, they extended healthcare benefits. I know it's not an issue in Canada. It is an issue here. Extended, let employees take their computers, made a lot of arrangements with other companies that were hiring at the same time. So there are a lot of accommodations, and the focus shifted immediately from, originally recruiting and the employees who are in, but to the employees who actually left the organization, and how they were treated was the indication. What their experience was of the company on the way out was the indication of the culture and the continuity of culture. Another examples of corporate kind of outreach and ability and willingness to help a broader community were training and certifications that some of the technology companies offered, IBM, Google, to retool, to retrain people to acquire those digital skills that are so essential. So I think where we're going to end up, and I'll welcome any discussion that will follow with further details on that, we're going to really be focused on that experience. And interestingly enough, as I started digging, there is an experience index that again is offered by the architectural firms that were initially involved in, building these new workplaces. And now obviously a lot of the rearrangement will need to happen to accommodate people returning to the offices after the pandemic recedes. So looking at this experience index that already, precedes what we will need to expand on and grow from, I think we can learn a lot. This is where I say the workplace joins other human-centric design domains, consumers, customers, talent pools, and vendors, and focusing on all of these different purposes of the workplace. The task, as it turns out, is actually the least of the orientations. If you're a purely task-oriented job, in a task-oriented job, that easily could be done at home, but all the other domains of employee activities, the social, the discovery, innovation, to a certain extent, entertainment and aspiration, personal growth, career growth, et cetera, remains to be associated with the workplace. And that's where experience is going to dominate. And again, in conclusion, I want to show you the updated and upgraded page from Airbnb. And as you can see, the experience is featured very clearly. And it's interesting how that particular company has pivoted in how they reimagined their business model, at the same time remaining true to their commitment to employee experience. And I think, and that will be my final word here, I think companies that have refocused their HR, refocused their investment and attention to how all of their employees experience and go through this particular crisis is going to determine how fast they're going to rebound back and how successful they're going to be as a brand, as an employment brand going forward. So I think that is going to fundamentally change what HR does, how it operates, and where its focus will remain to be for the immediate future after the pandemic. So this is all I want to say. Thank you very much.